My name is Walter Hughes. I was born in Santa Barbara, California in January of 1922. Born and raised on a farm. Went through all the Great Depression and episodes leading up to World War II, particularly the time when the war broke out in Europe and America refused to be involved. United States citizens would not hear of it. There were a German-American Bund that was saying, this is a European war, stay out of it. Lindbergh says the German Air Force is too mighty, don't get involved. And so it wasn't until December 7th that there even was any thought of war. Of course, the draft had started, and I had finished school in 1940. But in 1942, the draft board told me that my draft date was August 1st. I'd taken ROTC in high school, and I knew I did not want to be an infantryman. So I went down and signed up for the Air Force pilot training program. I entered the service in February 11th, 1943, and was trained during that year to be a pilot. I'd never been in an airplane before I stepped into the Army's cadet trainer. Got my wings and commission in January 7th of 1944. They sent me to learn how to fly the B-24 bomber, and then sent me to Fresno, where they assigned me a crew of 9 men. We took them down to Marchfield in Riverside, California for 3 months of training. And then when I went to San Francisco and signed for a brand new B-24 bomber. The crew and I hopped into it and flew it to England. We thought it was going to be our airplane, but as soon as we got there, they took it away from us. And from then on, I flew war-weary old B-24 bombers. Flying in the war was not easy. Aside from the fighting part of it, there were lots of things that we had to learn. For instance, the 8th Air Force is a very large organization. The last 6 months of the war, between B-24s and B-20 and B-17s, we put up 1,000 bombers a day. The task of getting those bombers into the air and in formation and over to the target was a very complex process. We would take off from about 40 bases, each base having what we called a forming area, where a formation ship flew a horseshoe course, and then as each plane took off in its assembly order, we just rose to the altitude and slipped into our assigned flight. And then each group took off slightly different times, so that when we all got formed, we were all at the same time in the proper position for the flight to Germany. Most interesting. The fighting itself was very difficult, very, very scary. We were frightened, but there was no panic. We knew our job, we did our job. A flight of 1,000 bombers was, they tell me, awesome. Normally we didn't all go to the same target, so we'd break up somewhere along the line and go slightly different targets. Early in the war, the fighters were the most difficult problem, but by the time I was there, we had escorts to the target, and so flak was the most dangerous problem that we had. Flying over Germany was not particularly interesting because most of the time we had a cloud cover, so we couldn't see the ground. When we could see the ground, we didn't like it much because the German gunners could see us just as well. There was always flak at the targets, heavy flak at most targets, which means exploding shells right outside our windows. Off the target and getting back home was a very pleasant experience. There were, of course, planes that were shot down and that sort of thing. But I was fortunate in not having the whole crew shot down, but I did have one man killed on the plane, and at a different time, 2 men shot by fighters. But only the one killed by flak, the others recovered. After the war, I finished near the end of the war, the first week of April. But I didn't realize the war was anywhere near over, because as we pushed the Germans back into Germany, they took their flak guns with them. And so that we were shot by more flak guns at the end of the war than we were earlier on. After my missions, they put me on a boat and sent me home. That was something I didn't enjoy, going over the ocean when I was flak happy from flying the war. In my training program at March Field in Riverside, I'd met acute whack on the base, and so as soon as I got back from that, we got married, 24th of July on 1945. I had started veterinary school before I went into the service, so we went back to Davis, California, completed the veterinary program, and started in a general practice. But then I got opportunity of a lifetime to go to work in a research poultry breeding organization. So I spent my entire career, veterinary career, working with poultry. My wartime experience was only a total of 36 months, but that was essentially a lifetime. The veterinary life was a different life.